It's Podathon week on the Big Sky Astrology podcast. And for 5 big days in a row, we're bringing you special episodes that put the fun in fundraising, including the week's planetary news, a closer look at the moon, and special Podathon surprises. Plus, your chance to win prizes, people. So many prizes. And now, here's your host, astrologer and author, April Elliott Kent.
Hello, invisible friend. April here, and the date today is September 3rd, 2025. Welcome to episode 308 of the Big Sky Astrology podcast and day 3 of the 6th annual Podathon. This is the week each year when I bring you 5 daily episodes, complete with the big astrological news of the week, and this week, interviews with 5 fantastic astrologers from across different astrological specialties. Of course, this is also the week when I make my appeal for donations to help me cover the costs of producing the podcast over the next year. And before we get started with today's episode, I really do need to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who has helped the show over the past year by making a donation, leaving a review, or to be honest, just by tuning in. I'm so happy to think that so many of you are tuning in and finding value in the show. But while I do my very best to run an economical podcast, there are costs associated with producing this weekly show. And I would rather turn to my listeners to help cover those costs than to take on advertising. So many of the podcasts I listen to have turned to an advertising model, and it really interferes with the flow of the shows and my enjoyment of them. And I will assume many of you feel the same. And so once a year during Labor Day week, I give you Podathon. And then the rest of the year, I don't have to talk about fundraising. You can make a one-time donation in any amount or become a regular monthly contributor. Just go to bigskyastropod.com. And to encourage your contributions, here are the giveaways for this year's Podathon. First, everyone who donates $25 or more, as well as my ongoing monthly PodPal contributors, will be entered in a drawing for a chance to win one of these prizes. One grand prize winner will win a 90-minute reading with me, a $275 value. 2 lucky donors will win a 60-minute personal astrology reading with me. That's a $215 value. 3 lucky donors will win a copy of my Followed by a Moon Shadow Eclipse Report, a $35 value. And that's going to help you get ready for this month's eclipses. To be entered in the drawing, you need to make your $25 donation at bigskyastropod.com no later than 11:59 p.m. Pacific Time on Monday, September 8th. The drawing will be held on September 9th, and the winners will be notified by email. If you're not able to donate that much, I'm also offering donors of only $10 or more a special bonus, a series of private YouTube videos for donors only. Over the past year, we have met virtually for most new moons, going in depth on big planetary transits and the symbolism of each new moon. And if you are not able to contribute financially at all, I completely understand. It has been a little bit of a tricky year so far, and a lot of us are holding on to our money. Here are a few easy, free ways you can show your love and support for the podcast. Please subscribe or follow on your app of choice. This is the very best way to help the show get discovered by new listeners. You could leave a 5-star rating or write a review either on Apple Podcasts or any of the other platforms that allow comments. These can inspire others to sample the show. And finally, recommend the show to an astrology-loving friend. However you show your appreciation, please know that I am deeply grateful. And now for today's episode. In this week's special daily episodes, I'm covering the week's major astrological news, along with lunar happenings and an interview with a fellow astrologer, each practicing in a particular astrological specialty: Hellenistic astrology, Vedic, evolutionary, astrocartography, and today I'm speaking with my colleague Margaret Gray about her astrological specialty, psychological astrology. But first, let's take a look at today's astrology. Mercury in Virgo squares Uranus in Gemini at 12:40 a.m. Pacific Time. Both Mercury and Uranus are planets of inspiration and what we do with that inspiration. And Uranus is currently in the sign of Gemini, which is also ruled by Mercury. If you've been looking for a breakthrough in any project you're working on, it will probably show up today. But it's the kind of planetary combination where it could show up as the result of a mistake you've made or a missed connection, possibly. Uranus tends to bring disruption, but that's not always the worst thing that could happen. Sometimes we have to be disrupted on a particular path before new ideas have a chance to emerge. Disruption also comes today via the moon in Capricorn square Mars in Libra at 4:19 a.m. and opposed Jupiter in Cancer at 5:50 a.m. You could wake up on the wrong side of the bed, as the expression goes, with these two lunar aspects. A little cranky maybe, bickering with your partner over breakfast, making mountains out of molehills, but the rest of the day is pretty smooth and could bring Capricorn productivity along with that inspiration from Mercury and Uranus. As you know, during this Podathon week, I'm bringing you interviews with 5 of my colleagues, each of whom will tell us about their particular astrological specialty. Today's interview is with psychological astrologer and licensed psychotherapist Margaret Gray. Here is our conversation. Today, I am delighted to welcome one of my very favorite astrologers, the dear Margaret Gray. Margaret is based in Dublin, and she works as a consulting astrologer, teacher, and psychotherapist. She brings a compassionate and psychologically informed approach to her work. With a background in both psychological astrology and counseling, Margaret offers a unique perspective that helps clients navigate life's transitions with clarity and heart. She's also director and founder of the Center for Relationships and Astrology, a 4-step certification program, offering in-depth astrological knowledge and practical tools to help you gain deeper understanding of yourself and your relationship patterns and dynamics. Whether she's working with individuals, couples, or groups, Margaret's warmth, depth of knowledge, and intuitive understanding of the human experience make her truly special. She's also the first astrologer to make a repeat appearance on the Big Sky Astrology podcast. She also appeared on episode 142, way back during the 2022 Podathon. Margaret is here today to talk to us about psychological astrology. And Margaret, it is such a pleasure to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you, April. Thank you for that very generous and lovely introduction. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Let's start with the basics. What do you think psychological astrology is? And how is it different from other forms of astrology or from conventional therapy for that matter?
I always say psychological astrology in the word, it's about psyche. And psyche in Greek, of course, is not just the mind, it's also the soul. So it's really an understanding of ourselves at a soul level and at a mind level and at an emotional level. So it's about increasing our awareness of ourselves so that we can evolve, develop, become really who we are meant to become. It's that process of individuation which Carl Jung, of course, describes so accurately, which is our journey on this planet. And I think in terms of how it's different to other approaches is that it's really about understanding ourselves, helping the client to understand themselves. It's non-deterministic. It's not about telling somebody, hey, next week you're going to get this fabulous job or meet this person or whatever. That may well happen, but we're really looking at the transits, the progressions, and the chart in terms of their individual life journey. And we're looking at the bare bones of it. We don't know how that person has expressed themselves. We also don't know the circumstances they're in. I mean, I always say the same chart of a child born in a country that is very wealthy and a country where the child is going through a war or really, really challenging experiences, that child is going to develop that chart in very different ways, probably. So we don't know that until the client is in front of us. So I always start from the premise that the client is their own expert. They are their own best expert. They know everything that I'm going to tell them, but sometimes it's forgotten. It's as if, everyday life comes on top and they've forgotten it. So all I'm doing is translating that language into a language that hopefully will reverberate with them and hopefully will help them join some dots also between what's happening currently and what happened earlier in life.
How's it different from conventional therapy, do you think? I suppose it's a similar process, but you're just not using the same language or the same reference points, obviously the astrological reference points. If you were a therapist who was not trained in astrology, is that about right?
I've got 3 hats, April. I have my therapy hat, I have my astrology hat, and then I put them both together. So I also do astrological counseling, and I love doing that. And even when I'm not bringing the astrology into the therapy, I always ask therapy clients permission. Can I look at their charts so that I have that in the background? So I think the difference is, first of all, astrology is maybe a one-off session, maybe a repeat session every 6 months or every year. Very, very different to therapy, which is an ongoing process, a journey where really there's a lot of interaction with the clients, where there's projection, where there's transference, where there's counter-transference. So all of that is what we work with the client in terms of the dynamics between me and them and what that stirs up, what that brings up. With astrology, really, it's psychoeducational. I'm informing the client. I'm translating the language. I'm also at times doing therapy because if something comes up that distresses the client, I will leave the astrology for a moment and, of course, support them in that process. But I'm very clear that it's a very contained session. If they want to do more work, then I'll say, okay, this goes into the counseling arena. Is this what you'd like to do? We have to recontract, we have to renegotiate, and it's very different. And I do remind them because sometimes it's a shock to go from the chart reading where I'm doing a lot of talking, we're interacting, to therapy where I'm doing a lot less talking and a lot more of kind of probing, asking questions, reflecting. It's a very different set of skills.
They sound like great skills to have, even for an astrologer who's just working with astrology. And you open up something like a big Pluto transit, and it can bring up enormous emotions and reactions. And it's difficult as just an astrologer to find ways to handle that and help them find resources they may need to go through that process. Because it's not just about an event. We look at a transit as an event, but rather as a process they're going through. An average astrologer as myself isn't necessarily equipped to deal with them through that whole process.
I really like the fact that at the CPA, when I went through Liz Green's training with Liz Green, in order to be on the course, we had to do our own therapy. And she also strongly advised us to study and at least do some counseling training. And certainly, I personally feel that for anybody setting themselves up as a psychological astrologer, it's pretty imperative that they've done counseling or psychological training of some kind, because clients coming to us are assuming that we have the tools to deal with those psychological issues. And so they will often bring trauma, childhood issues, or relationship trauma, or all kinds of other issues. And I think in fairness, we need to be equipped to deal with that, because otherwise it can be really distressing for the client. So I liked the fact that Liz Green always said, if you're going to call yourself a psychological astrologer, you need to have done your own work, first of all, on yourself, and to keep doing that, because that's a work in progress till we drop, but also to have some training in psychotherapy so that you can deal with the kind of clients who are going to be drawn to you.
And you've answered another question I had, which is what kind of training or certification should we expect of someone who calls themselves specifically a psychological astrologer? And there is, as you say, conventional training in psychology. And I know a lot of the major astrology organizations now also have certification programs for counseling skills and something like that.
Yes, and I think certainly when I was on the ESAR board years ago, we said, we were doing the consulting skills training, which is still being offered. And I think a lot of orgs are getting so much better at offering consulting skills. However, this is just my personal bias. I think sometimes it's absolutely brilliant to do that. But to really call oneself psychological astrologer, one needs to have gone through the 2, 3, 4-year training courses to be a psychotherapist. Because consulting skills doesn't require you to be in your own therapy. So you have some skills of what to say, and it's great. I do it on the relationship and astrology course. I do a session on counseling skills with couples, but it's really just to give people the words, how to deal with it, what might come up. In terms of really dealing with the issues, I think people need 3, 4, 5-year training course, really, to have those skills. And there are a lot of us who do psychological astrology and are also psychotherapists or psychologists.
When somebody goes into a psychological astrology reading, what do you think their expectations are in terms of what they're going to focus on? It sounds as if you don't see it as a particularly predictive way of working with astrology, that it's more about going into personality, as you say, the psyche and things like that. How might a typical psychological astrology reading be different as an experience from somebody just going to an astrologer?
I think usually I'm trying to think of what clients will bring. And often it's when they're at a point when they're stuck in their personal development. So a lot of clients will come to me and say, I feel like that somewhere I got stuck, that I'm not really, using my potential. And that can be on a spiritual level, on a psychological level, on a practical level in terms of career. Or it might be that I work a lot with relationships. So I get a lot of people when they're, who are stuck in relationships, sometimes with their family members, with their adult children, or with their partners, or with their extended family. So often they'll come to psychological astrology when there's kind of like an energetic block where something has got stuck, or where they feel also at a crossroads. And people get often so many feelings, as come up of kind of shame or blame or guilt or whatever. And I think when those feelings it's almost like they get compacted and then people get stuck. It's like they get frozen and they can't move. So I think they come to a reading to help them to understand and also to join the dots with the past. Sometimes people really, they know they've had trauma in their past, but what they don't know is what is the impact of that. And they're worried about, oh my goodness, does this mean I have to relive it? And no, of course, the purpose isn't to re-traumatize them. But sometimes just making those connections can be incredibly helpful. And making the connections with the ancestors, with the whole family dynamics, all of that is really I think can be quite healing in itself.
Yeah, I agree. And I was speaking with another one of our colleagues in one of these interviews, and we were talking about this process many astrologers use, including myself, to go back to times when somebody had a similar planetary transit going on or something in their progressions or something, to try to get a general feel for how they've responded to that part of their chart, getting hit by something. And then having the experience from time to time that you revisit something and the person has had some terrible experience, and then they start to get really afraid that's going to happen again. And having to explain to them, well, if you lost your remaining parent at that age, that's not going to happen this time. That is tricky, though, wanting to make those connections. But for those of us who don't have training in psychological counseling, it can leave you sometimes in a little bit of a treacherous space. What do you think astrologers should do when we find ourselves in that situation? Obviously, be empathetic and kind, but
I think it's really for me to figure out what is the real fear for this person. So if maybe, as you said, they had the loss of a parent, where are they in the grieving process for that? Are they still in that? Is there still fear of losing the people around them? And really to explore a little bit with them that grieving process or the loss, what that meant to them. Because it's almost like, for me, it's always following the thread back to where does it lead me to? What losses did they have in childhood that this loss compounded, that maybe so the fear of this transit is compounding again. So I try to go back with the thread to early childhood and see, okay, when was the first loss? When was your first bereavement? Who supported you in that? What supported you in that? Really to get to the point, the ideal is for people to realize that in the chart, we also have so many aspects that give us resilience. And to me, that's key, that really to remind people, look, you got through this. Look at how resilient you are. Look at how courageous you are. So whatever happens now, you have the resilience to cope with it. And I think ultimately that's really what people are asking. They're saying, if something awful happens again, am I going to cope or am I going to fall apart at the seams? So to me, it's then, okay, let's look at your chart and find where the resilience is and really reassure people, look at this. This is what you have here and this is what really helps you. So none of us know what's going to happen. I mean, anybody could drop dead tomorrow or anything. Anybody could lose their job or whatever. But it's always about reminding people, you can do this, you can get through this. And if they can't, if they genuinely are in a place where they're saying, if anything happens, I'm going to have a breakdown or whatever, then it's to see, okay, what can help you in this? And that's where it's like, okay, have you considered counseling? Have you considered joining a group, maybe a bereavement group? Have you considered, do you have friends? So it's really tapping them into also other resources. So part of it is assessing, do they have the resilience? Are they able to withstand this? Or are they really very close to the edge? And that's a little bit of exploring. I like to go into a little bit of like, how did you cope last time? Who was there? Whatever. And really just gently evaluating what will help this person the most. Ultimately, it's really about helping the person to really find their own inner strength and to recognize when that isn't there, because sometimes we also want to sugarcoat it all. And it's like, you'll be fine, you're great. And that's a nonsense. Some people are not fine or great. Some people have breakdowns after a relationship breaks up. So some people need practical help. I usually keep a list of organizations and everything in different countries that I also can give people. And I'll say, I'm going to email you these support systems, these contacts that maybe you can get in touch with to get some help.
What a great idea. Yeah, that's very beautifully said. Thank you. And it kind of brings me to another question, which is, are there particular astrological tools that you find helpful in psychological astrology? For instance, the things that help you find that resilience in the chart or those kinds of emotional capabilities. What are the tools you really like to use?
I focus a lot on the moon because, of course, being a psychotherapist, I look at attachment. So to me, the moon, aspects to the moon, converse, progressions, to the moon, seeing what happened in the womb, what happened after the womb, what really is your key attachment style. But not in terms of blaming mother. It's like she left you for half an hour, but more in terms of this is your chart. This was the person, the situation you were able to project this on. How do you own this for yourself and integrate it? So I love progressions with the moon. And really, I love progressions generally because they are that internal development. It's like the bell goes off. So I really like that. Transits also, I find, of course, very helpful. I tend to use them more as internal development, although the transpersonal planets, I think they're so hard to contain within ourselves that something can easily manifest. And I really do look a lot at Chiron in terms of what is happening to Chiron in the chart, in terms of how is the person feeling. If Chiron is being aspected in the chart, people can feel a little vulnerable, a little kind of sore, a little ouchy, as I often say. So I do pay attention quite a lot to Chiron, what it's doing, what's aspecting it, and what's happening to the person at that time.
I remember we had another conversation about Chiron, and it was very helpful to me because I really struggled with that symbol. I guess what I'm still left with is the feeling of I can kind of feel the significance of Chiron, especially in synastry, but it's hard for me to identify in just a birth chart reading what makes Chiron particularly difficult compared to something like Pluto or Saturn. So in other words, what would I get from Chiron that I'm not getting from those other planets? What do you think?
I think for me, Chiron is that part of us. It's like the connection between the human and the divine, so that I really believe we're divine beings in a human body. But our human body is imperfect. Our mind can do all kinds of tricks. Our emotions can really drown us out at times. Our body can just fall apart anytime. And I think Chiron almost embodies that half human, half horse element, that very primal part of us that thinks it's so sophisticated and has sophisticated parts, but fundamentally is going through a human experience. So to me, when Chiron gets aspected, that wound, that realization that we're not perfect, that we don't have control over our body, we might have some control over our mind if we're lucky, but we'll get to a point in life where maybe we won't. And our emotions, we try our best, but we all know that, when hormones start going crazy, particularly for us women throughout our lives, we don't have that much control over it. There's chemicals that actually move around. So I think Chiron for me is that wonderful reminder to be compassionate towards ourselves and others. It's that moment when, somebody is being rude to us and suddenly we think, gosh, something must be hurting them or something must have gone wrong or whatever. And I think if we can feel that rather than attack back and think, that primal part of us that comes out and wants to attack, and instead we stop, we'll probably realize that it's okay. It's actually nothing to do with us. It's just. And Chiron to me is that part of it. It is the animal in a trap. And I think when people are going through very harsh Chiron transits, they really can be. I think it was either Liz or Melanie Reinhardt who wrote that wonderful book on Chiron, who talked about even a rabbit, if it's caught in a trap and you try to free it, it will bite you because it's in such pain. I think it's that Chironian pain and that we can heal it. It forms a scab, but it never goes away. So I think we know that if that's scratched, it starts bleeding again. And if we can find that compassion in the bleeding rather than the rage of the hurt animal, that's where we connect. And that's why it's so powerful in synastry, because it can give incredible compassion for the other person. And it's one of the connecting planets, really, I think, in synastry. Do you find that, as well, that it really can give incredible empathy and compassion if we can get over our own pain and hurt and rage, that rage of like, I don't want to be like this, the rage of when we're getting older and we lose our independence.
I thought it was just me. I thought it was just my Chiron. So I love to talk to you about Chiron, and I love that part about how it symbolizes the humanity, the human part of us. and the pain that doesn't go away. And I think I told you that other time, the thing that always bothered me about it was people seemed so connected to the woundedness with no interest of how to learn from it or share your learning with others, because Chiron was a teacher. And I always see that as part of the Chiron journey too, is to share what you know. But boy, it's hard in synastry. I've had those connections in synastry where someone's bumping hard on my Chiron and the feelings come from a very irrational place, of feeling attacked or feeling threatened in some way. So it is very interesting in synastry for sure.
It's that primal part of us. And I love that you said the teaching, because I think if we begin to even acknowledge and heal, it's like that shadow part of us that comes up, we can actually then help others. So it's like people who have been through a serious health issue, cancer or something like that, that they then turn around from that pain and help other people going through it, or a breakup, a divorce, or a bereavement. And that's Chiron at its best, really, where we use it to help others. And in doing that, it heals us too. I mean, it's done from a place of possibly altruism, but actually it's also about healing ourselves.
What sort of resources would you point people to at the beginning of their journey into learning more about psychological astrology? Obviously, the work of Liz Green, who you were fortunate to study with. What are some other kind of teachers or books or courses that you would point people toward?
I love, of course, the work of Howard Susportas as well as Liz Green. I love Melanie Reinhardt's work, Erin Sullivan, Lynn Bell. Goodness, there's a lot of good work out there. Marcia Ferreira is doing great work in Brazil. She's a psychologist as well as psychological astrologer. Aleo Lopez. There's a lot of really good people. Yvonne Smith-Tarnas, of course, is wonderful. And she and I thought for several years courses in psychological astrology. We haven't done it for a little bit because she's so busy with her Jungian work. But I certainly would encourage people to, have a look around. I mean, Barish does great work also in Turkey. I know it's not just purely psychological, but certainly a lot of it is. Your work, of course, April, and I think there's a lot of really good people doing a lot of work that has that psychological depth that really does the work of looking, right into people's psyche.
I'm so happy that you mentioned Erin Sullivan. She left us a couple of years ago, I think it was. What a brilliant astrologer. And I'm hoping that her work will not be forgotten as time goes on, because some of her books, I believe, might be out of print, but just brilliant. Her work with Saturn, her work with retrograde planets, and she has a brilliant book about midlife astrology as well.
Oh, I love her work. And didn't she do something on families as well? I think there was something about generational planets and transits and so on. I remember reading her work is astounding. I very much encourage. I think we've got it on the reading list even for the relationships and astrology course because it's so good. So it's excellent work.
Well, let us know where people can find you. Maybe tell us a little bit more about your certification program and the other things that you have coming up. I know you're speaking at UAC next year.
Yes, I can't wait to see you there and lots of other colleagues and friends. It's so exciting at last.
Yeah.
Yes, we've set up the Center for Relationships and Astrology, or I've set it up. And there's a new program called Astrology of the Heart. It is a 4-step certification program, but people are very welcome to take just one step or more. They don't have to do the whole certification program. They can do just the course for themselves. The first step is about the self, because it always starts and ends with the self. So it's all about the natal chart from a relational perspective. Step 2 are the basic techniques of synastry and composite chart. It's a live interactive class, so people can ask questions, explore their own chart. Step 3 is about developmental stages. We've got the wonderful Alex Trenoweth looking at adolescence and really looking at how all these stages impact our relationships. And Step 4 is really a mixture of all kinds of topics, but we're also going to have 2-hour webinars, which we're starting to put together, which hopefully you'll be teaching on too, April, for more advanced students on topics that are a little more advanced. So that's going to be coming. But in terms of the 4-step program, really looking forward to it. Some amazing teachers on it. Few of us are, in fact, psychotherapists as well. So it's really a process. That's why I encourage people to do the whole course, because it's ideally a process of transformation about the self, about looking at our dynamics and relationship patterns and really understanding from a heartfelt perspective what it means to love and what it means to be loved. So that's really the purpose of the course. So I'm very excited.
Well, Margaret, thank you so much for making the time and for talking to my audience about this part of astrology I know a lot of people are very interested in. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And of course, if anybody wants to get a hold of me, do go to my website, relationshipsandastrology.com, and email me with any questions about psychological astrology. Always happy to answer them. April, thank you for inviting me. It's been a joy.
Oh, you're most welcome. It's been great to have you. Oh, don't you love her? Margaret is not only a wonderful astrologer, but she exudes so much kindness and empathy. Well, that's everything on my show sheet, so I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you for listening to the Big Sky Astrology Podcast and joining me for the 3rd episode of the 6th annual Podathon. This weekly podcast is audience funded, and your generous donations help me keep the podcast coming to you ad-free. To make your donation, please go to bigskyastropod.com. Anyone who donates $10 or more will receive access to a series of private YouTube videos throughout the year. And if you donate $25 or more, you will automatically be entered in my drawing for a chance to win a 90-minute reading, a 60-minute reading, or one of my moon shadow eclipse reports. This week, I'm thanking monthly donors Kayla Grant and Anastasia Molnar. Anastasia and Kayla, thank you so much for listening and for supporting the show with your donations. Thanks very much to all of you for dropping in during this 6th annual Podathon. Join me again bright and early tomorrow morning for another episode, including an interview with Hellenistic astrologer Patrick Watson. And until then, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars.
That's it for today. Don't forget to make your donation at bigskyastropod.com and join us each Labor Day weekday for another very special episode of the Big Sky Astrology Podcast.